We're here today on Country Pocket on WUSB with Trapper Shep. Uh, the new album is Osborne, and it is a really intense and personal story. That first song you just heard was called Loaded Gun. Um, so let me try to at least at first, let's unpack things chronologically. You described yourself as being sort of like Frankenstein. Tell me how you wound up put back together in little pieces.
Oh, well, I had spinal decompression surgery when I was like 21 years old. So I think that was kind of the play on that. Uh, just kind of being put back together surgically, I suppose. Having a number of BMX bike accidents. I think I just kind of thought that was a funny way of putting it. So, yeah.
So, what drew you to the BMX biking sort of life? That's definitely an
That
intense
was,
place.
yeah. I think when I was a kid, I was really into sports and uh, you know, baseball, basketball, football, and then found BMX to be this kind of different way that you could express yourself. Uh, you know, it kind of felt artistic at times with the different kind of tricks you could do and the different styles that everyone had. So I think that was kind of a uh, cool way to express yourself as a kid. Like skateboarding is for so many as well. So then it was kind of a natural progression into music, I suppose. After hurting my back, my mom encouraged me to try guitar out. So that was the next thing.
Well, I'd say the guitar worked for you. Um, Dealing with all those injuries, I'm sure you experienced a lot of pain.
Hmm. Yeah, no doubt.
Um, did like everything hurt at that point? Like, how beat up were you?
Just major sciatica pain down my leg and bad soreness and issues in my back. I had a few other accidents, not quite worth mentioning, but some pretty gnarly stuff for a young kid to go through. But yeah, the spinal decompression surgery, that was a tough one. So no one gets a free ride in this life, you know?
Especially not on a BMX bike.
True. No pun intended, free ride.
I was, making the pun. But tell me about the attitude. Obviously, the first song I played was Loaded Gun. Tell me about the doctor's attitude when you looked for some relief with your pain.
Well, a doctor is only trying to do their job in a way, but I think a doctor is influenced by an environment much greater than themselves. And that environment at the time was to, put band-aids over uh, pain, which was deemed chronic or incurable with, you know, prescription painkillers, opioids. And I think the Sackler family really popularized that idea of chronic pain being something that was sort of incurable and that had to be treated, um, you know, forever. And I think once they set that precedent, it sort of opened the floodgates for doctors to be prescribing more of these different painkillers. And I don't necessarily think it's all the fault of the doctors, though. I think it's the fault of sort of, the environment in which a doctor is working. And for me, it wasn't just painkillers that were a problem. I had other issues as well down the line. But yeah, it's certainly a part of my story. So, uh,
Is it the thing that sort of drew you into that cycle?
yeah, I would guess so because those medications, they have a way of tricking and training your brain to be sort of cure-alls, momentarily, physically, psychologically. They take such a, toll on your brain. So it's kind of a catch-22 taking those, but I think, in some instances, of course, they're warranted, and especially in clinical settings. But when you get outside of those settings and you give a young kid sort of free rein over taking these medications, it just became a thing that was hard to stop for me. Even though, I wasn't like a Rush Limbaugh type taking a handful of them at a time. I was never like that. I was trying to just treat pain. But then when I found out um, that they were really hard to stop, well, that was really hard, you know?
Yeah,
So,
by that point you were pretty without realizing it, you were pretty addicted.
yeah, without realizing it, doctors call it dependence, which is kind of funny. I think it's kind of a way to um, protect themselves. So they call it dependence, or, addiction is probably more the truthful way to look at it. Um, but yeah, yeah.
And then once your body is just craving chemical highs, you're not in a situation to, stop there and get off that ride.
hmm Yeah, it's tough because everyone, finds different cross addictions, and I definitely succumbed to that later on after I kind of kicked this pill thing. But yeah, once again, there's no free ride with anything. Um, Everyone has their different vices.
So, so when you describe getting that prescription as a loaded gun, you know,
hmm
what would you feel like holding a bottle of those pills today?
Mm. I would hand them over to someone else and say, "Here, take these. Get them away from me." Um, you know, I suppose it's all situational. If I had, broken my back and was completely laid up and in complete agony, and the only solution was that, it might look different, right? But it's position, in that position. I'm not sure, but yeah, I think what we know now as a culture, um, especially in America, having dealt with the opioid epidemic, is that those are just really they're dangerous. They're dangerous. There needs to be more guardrails, I think.
So, no, when you're talking about wanting to get on that BMX bike, and I'm sure it could be it could be applied to so many other things in the place where you were. Let me do as I feel. Um, Tell me about sort of chasing down what comes into your head.
Is that the Three Speed Queen song you're referring to?
Mhm.
Yeah. I think that's just wanting autonomy and independence. Um, and yeah, I think it's striving for independence. Yeah, I don't know necessarily if that's tied to addiction or just growing up or kind of a loss of innocence or what that is. But I just ad-libbed that line actually. There were quite a few lines in that song in particular that I just completely kind of came up with on the spot, and ad-libbed. So,
So you're not done with your songs even when you're recording. You're like,
yeah, still working on it.
oh,
I'm a work in progress, so are my songs, you know what I mean?
oh, that's a killer line, man.
Yeah.
So, um, do you feel angry about how things wound up going for you?
Um, in what way, I guess?
Um,
I think everyone feels resentment, especially in maybe sobriety. But it's good not to point your finger at, you know, other people always, and I do think about that. That's why I mentioned, you asked about that song Loaded before, and I said, well, it's not just the doctor's fault or anything like that. It's like at some point it's got to be yourself, that you kind of got to set straight. But I think it's natural to feel some amount of anger. Um, no one likes to suffer, and but life has that, It's the first noble truth in Buddhism. In life, there is suffering. So, but yeah, so I mean, some degree of anger.
um,
Everyone has that, though, you know.
any pharmaceutical Titan family in particular?
Uh, the Sackler family, I suppose, they were really responsible for the opioid epidemic in America, and I think they created this empire of pain. And like I said before, speaking to the environment, I think they um, created this whole idea of chronic pain. They were geniuses, evil geniuses of sort of creating the illness and then treating that illness with what they came up with. So, uh, yeah, they really they knew what they had. They knew it was highly addictive, and they promoted it anyway. And they blamed, poor people down south in rural communities for, you know, getting addicted to their substances, and they didn't take responsibility. But eventually, um, our government had to step in and uh, prosecute them, or not our government, but the judicial system did, uh, you know, did not uh, did not favor them. You know, they had to pay out a big sum of money, which does no, there's no amount of money that can account for the pain that they cause, but it's something.
It it most certainly is something. So, I here's the part where I get a little personal. The background I came from was a family that really saw some of the worst of addiction. My mother went through a lot of suffering and in turn caused a lot of suffering thanks to addiction. And I feel like that that both made things a little tricky for me growing up, but it also made one decision crystal clear, which was when I was dealing with chronic pain. Um, I I turned down the offer of, the sorts of drugs I'm sure the Sacklers would have loved for me to have taken, not
Hmm.
because not because the pain I was feeling wasn't real, but because I said to myself, I know where this train gets off.
Hmm. When was
So
that?
what?
When was that?
That was really, I'd say about a decade ago when I was really struggling. Um,
Hmm.
it turns out um, what I needed was some anti-seizure medication.
Hmm.
Really stopped all my neurological pain.
Hmm. Good.
So, happy ending, but I'm just saying, like, it does amaze me, this system we had, that they thought of opioids before the thing that actually treated the condition I was suffering from. So,
Hmm.
so when you talked about the doctor just finding a way to hand out the pills, I was like, yeah, yeah, that checks out.
Hmm.
Um, what do you think of the way what do you think of the way society treats people suffering from addiction, at least compared to the way society treats uh, folks like the Sacklers who profit from it?
I think, there's this mental health epidemic in America and there's this addiction epidemic, and I think we've really come around in terms of treating mental health and normalizing it and just kind of normalizing that, as they say, it's okay to not be okay. But I think addiction's another thing that I think there's a lot of shame and isolation and guilt attached to it. And I think that's a shame because what people need is, you know, acceptance and community and love. They don't need more shame. And that's the name of the game. I think a lot of people feel great shame. for their addiction, and it just creates this vicious cycle, you know. So yeah, I think we have a ways to come around in terms of that.
Well, I'm certainly not leaving things on a happy note at the moment. We're gonna listen to some music and be right back. Um, and I feel like the second half of this interview is going to be maybe a little more positive.
Let's hope.